Peace, peace. Barigani, Islam, Salam, Hetepu, Rahubat, Gina Lako Ninani, Chief Noble, Bandele, Elamine, back again for another video. Today's video, we're going to be discussing the Dred Scott case and the 14th Amendment. Before we get into that, check me out on Instagram under Morris Chief Noble. You can also check out my books on Amazon. And for any information, you can check me out. Bandele Elamine number, Cash App, and my email. So, and don't forget, give me a thumbs up and please subscribe. And also check the notification. Okay. And also check for whatever the links are going to be in the description. Okay. So with that being said, let's get into this video about Dred Scott. All right. So check. A lot of people know about Dred Scott. Okay. A lot of people know about Dred Scott. And Dred Scott is very important to melanated Americans. Okay, like, you know, so-called black Negro colored. The Dred Scott case, 13th Amendment, but the 14th Amendment, like those are like the most important legal documents and decisions that we should know. Okay. Now, what we're going to get into is Dred Scott. Now, what is Dred Scott? Most of y'all know Dred Scott was about slavery. So let's look. It says Dred Scott versus Sanford. Okay, argued in 1856. It says decided the Supreme Court ruled that Americans, I want you to understand it, it said it ruled that Americans of African descent, whether free or slave, were not American citizens and could not sue in federal court. The court also ruled that Congress lacked power to ban slavery in U.S. territories. Finally, the court declared that the rights of slave owners were constitutionally protected by the Fifth Amendment because slaves were categorized as property. So look at that. Basically saying that whether you're free or slave, you are not American citizens. Now, I want you to remember they used the word American citizens, and they didn't use the term United States citizens or U.S. citizens. They used the term American citizens. And now this is on PBS. This is PBS. This is from the Supreme Court, first 100 years Supreme Court history. Okay, so you know this is legit. Now it says. So let's look at the controversy, okay? The controversy of this whole case began in 1833 when the Emerson, a surgeon with the Army, purchased Dred Scott, a slave, and eventually moved Scott to a base in Wisconsin territory. Slavery was banned in that territory because of the Missouri Compromise. So it says Scott lived there for the next 4 years, hiring himself out for work during the long stretches when Emerson was away. In 1840, Scott and his new wife and their young children moved to Louisiana and then to St. Louis with Emerson. Emerson died in 1843, leaving the Scott family to his wife, Irene. In 1846, after laboring and saving for years, the Scotts sought to buy their freedom from Sanford, but she refused. Dred Scott then sued Sanford in the state court, arguing that he was legally free because he and his family had lived in territory where slavery was banned. So in 1850, the state court finally declared Scott free. However, Scott's wages had been withheld pending the resolution of the case. And during that time, Mrs. Emerson remarried and left her brother, John Sanford, to deal with her affairs. So Mr. Sanford, unwilling to pay the back wages owed to Scott, he appealed the decision to the Supreme Court, and the court overturned the lower court's decision and ruled in favor of Sanford. Scott then filed another lawsuit in federal court claiming damages against Sanford's brother, okay, for Sanford alleged physical abuse against him. The jury ruled that Scott could not sue in federal court because he was already deemed a slave under Missouri law. Scott appealed to the United States Supreme Court, which reviewed the case in 1856 due to clerical error at the time. Sanford's name was misspelled in court records. Okay, the Supreme Court, in the infamous decision written by Justice Robert B. Taney, ruled that it lacked jurisdiction to take Scott's case because Scott, or at least, had been a slave. First, the court argued that they couldn't entertain Scott's case because federal courts, including the Supreme Court, are courts of particular and limited jurisdiction and may only hear cases brought by selected parties involving limited claims. Okay, so that was their first reason. For sake of time, I'm going to go to the second one. It says the court argued that Scott's status as a citizen of a free state did not necessarily give him status as a U.S. citizen. While the states were free to create their own citizenship criteria and had done so before the Constitution even came into being, the Constitution gives Congress exclusive authority to define national citizenship. Moreover, the court argued that even if Scott was deemed free under the laws of the state, he would not qualify as an American citizen because he was black. The court asserted that in general, U.S. citizens were only those who were members of the political community at the time of the Constitution's creation. Along with those individuals, heirs and slaves were not part of the community. Finally, the court argued that in any case, Scott could not be defined as free by virtue of his residency in the territories. The court viewed slaves as property, and the Fifth Amendment forbids Congress from taking property away from individuals without just compensation. Justice Benjamin Curtis issued a strong dissent. Okay, now, let's see what we got. 8. Look, the Dred Scott case basically was saying that they didn't even want to deal with the case. They was like, he was a slave. He was misnomered as black, Negro, colored. And under those terms, he was deemed as not having any citizenship with the United States, having no agreement with the United States. And they kind of took a blind eye to them because of that. Now, you got to understand that before the 14th Amendment, melanated people, so-called black, Negro, and colored, did not have a United States citizenship. And really, there was no such thing as a United States citizenship. The United States citizenship really became defined in what we look at the 14th Amendment, which we're going to look at right now. Okay, so let's look at the 14th Amendment and see like how Congress is going to get out of this, because, you know, that court case decision made it very difficult, and they said almost impossible for Congress to be able to reverse that. So let's look at how Congress tried to reverse that. So we got the 14th Amendment, y'all. The 14th Amendment is what gave people United States citizenship. 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution was adopted in 1868. Okay, so we're talking about 12 years later after Dred Scott. It says it was one of the Reconstruction Amendments. Now that's important too, because Reconstruction Amendments was 13th, 14th, and 15th. You can't see it down there. But under that time, the South had no real power because that was after the Civil War. They lost. So all those amendments were passed, basically forced down the Southern people's throat. They didn't have no power. So, a lot of people look at these three amendments as, kind of shaky. But anyway, nonetheless, it says it addresses citizenship rights, equal protection under the law, and was proposed in response to issues related to former slaves following the American Civil War. The amendment was bitterly contested, y'all, particularly by the states of the defeated Confederacy, which were forced to ratify it in order to regain representation in Congress. So they was forced on them. The amendment, particularly in first section, is one of the most litigated parts of the Constitution, forming the basis landmark for Supreme Court decisions such as Brown versus Education, Roe versus Wade regarding abortion, Bush versus Gore. Okay, regarding same-sex marriages in 2015. So this 14th Amendment is very litigated. The amendment first section concludes several clauses: the citizenship clause, privileges and immunity clause, due process, and equal protection. Now, this is what's interesting. It says that the citizenship clause provides a broad definition of citizenship, nullifying the Supreme Court's decision in Dred Scott, which had held that American descended from African slaves could not be citizens of the United States. Now, this is really deep. Since the slaughterhouse cases in 1873, the privileges or immunities clause has been interpreted to do very little. Okay? Very interesting. So the privileges and immunity clause has been severed because of this case. So let's look at this case real quick. It says it was an 1873 Supreme decision that held that privileges or immunity clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, only protects the legal rights that are associated with federal citizenship, not those that pertain to, and it doesn't go all the way, but it basically to state. That's state, pertaining to state. Okay? Very important. Look at that case. Okay? Look at that case. Now it says, the due process prohibits state and local governments from depriving persons of life, liberty, or property without fair procedure. Now this goes different. They looking at depriving you life, liberty, and property, like the Fifth Amendment had property, reserve your right to property. This one did it without fair procedure versus the Fifth Amendment, which was different. Okay, you got to go back and look. But it says the Supreme Court ruled that this clause makes most of the Bill of Rights as applicable to the states as to the federal government. The third and fourth sections of the amendment are seldom litigated. However, the second section's reference to rebellion or other crimes has been invoked as a constitutional ground for felony disenfranchisement. The fourth section was held in Perry versus United States to prohibit a current Congress from abrogating a contract of debt incurred by a prior Congress. The fifth section gives Congress the power to enforce the amendment provisions by appropriate legislation. However, after city versus whatever, the power may not be used to contradict a Supreme Court decision